Hello everyone, my name is Andreina Morales and today I will be presenting my Capstone research project on the challenges in identifying human trafficking victims within the United States criminal justice system. One of the most complicated and underreported crimes in the US is human trafficking. One of the biggest problems with the system is that victims are often wrongly identified as criminals, especially in cases of prostitution, labor violations, or immigration-related crimes. Instead of being seen as people who have been coerced, defrauded, or forced, many victims are treated like criminals in the system. This problem is even worse because trafficking is often hidden, and many victims do not come forward because they are scared, manipulated, or they don't trust the police. Research indicates that trafficking manifests in various forms, such as sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and domestic servitude, complicating the consistent identification of victims across the diverse contexts. Because of how complicated it is, the system often doesn't recognize victims when they first come into contact with it, which is one of the most important steps into getting help. This mistake in identifying someone has serious effects. People who are victims may be arrested, held, or given criminal records, which makes it harder for them to get housing, healthcare, and legal help. It also makes people less likely to work with the police, which makes investigations less effective and makes it less likely that prosecutions will be successful. Because of this, traffickers can keep doing business with little trouble. This mistake also makes long-term systemic problems worse. When victims are not properly identified, data on trafficking becomes wrong, which makes it harder to do research and make policies. This mistake is so hard that the problem keeps being misunderstood and not reported enough. In the end, the criminal justice system does a worse job of protecting victims and punishing criminals. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act and Safe Harbor laws are two examples of policies that are already in place to deal with human trafficking. The goal of these rules was to define trafficking, protect victims, and punish those who break the law, but research has shown that they do not always work in practice. These policies set up a strong legal framework at the federal and state levels, but how well they work in real life is what really matters. In many cases, these laws aren't fully followed at the local level, especially when victims first meet the police. This gap between policy and practice is one of the main reasons why victims are still wrongly identified. The main problem is not that there isn't a policy, but that it isn't always followed. There are no standard procedures across jurisdictions, and law enforcement agencies often use these rules in different ways. When looking for possible victims, officers often use their own judgment instead of following those set rules. This depends on discretion, which leads to inconsistent case handling and a higher chance of mistakes. Research also shows that some police officers may not have had enough training to spot signs of trafficking, which makes it even more likely that they will get it wrong. So even well thought out policies don't always work the same in different areas. Studies indicate that victims frequently do not conform to the stereotypes anticipated by police officers. A lot of victims act in ways that are caused by trauma, fear, and coercion, which can be mistaken for resistance or criminal intent. Identification rates also differ greatly based on the agency's resources, training, and goals. For instance, victims may seem uncooperative, scared, or even defensive, which make officers misread their behavior. Research also shows that agencies that have more resources and training that is specific to their field tend to identify people more often. This shows that getting the right training and support from the institutions is very important for getting better results. Research has demonstrated that various policies alternatives can enhance victims' identification. These include using victim-centered methods, offering more specialized training, and making it easier for agencies to work together. The goal of these strategies is to better understand how victims act and to make their response more informed and coordinated. Victim-centered approaches put the needs of the victims first, not the needs of the suspect. This helps build trust and makes it easier for people to work together. At the same time, working together between agencies makes sure that victims get all the help that they need and make investigations stronger. Specialized training also plays a major role, since officers who are trained to recognize trafficking indicators are less likely to misinterpret victim behavior. Furthermore, agencies' collaboration reduces gaps in communication and allows for a more complete understanding of each case, which is especially important given how complex trafficking situations can be. Recent studies emphasize the necessity of broadening identification initiatives beyond conventional criminal justice context. Research also shows that many victims have repeated contact with these sectors before even interacting with law enforcement, which means these environments are critical points for early intervention. For example, healthcare professionals may notice physical or psychological signs of abuse, while transportation workers may observe suspicious travel patterns. Expanding identification efforts to these areas helps close the gap between victimization and detection, which is one of the main weaknesses identified in current policies. People often find victims in places like transportation system, hospitals, and hotels. More training and awareness in these areas makes it possible to find problems and fix them sooner. These places are often where victims can meet with professionals who are not police officers. By giving more training to these areas, it is possible to spot trafficking situations earlier before they get worse in the criminal justice system. I came up with a few policy suggestions based on this research. First, police departments should require and keep up with training on how to spot signs of trafficking and how to deal with trauma. Second, jurisdictions should use standardized screening tools to cut down on how much officers have to use their own judgment. Third, social services, healthcare providers, and community groups should all be part of the multidisciplinary task forces. Finally, awareness and training should be expanded to sectors outside of criminal justice to enhance early identification. These recommendations are designed to directly address the gaps identified in current policies, particularly the lack of consistency, training, and coordination. By focusing on both prevention and identification, these strategies aim to create a more effective and victim-centered system overall. Additionally, these recommendations align with existing research that emphasizes the importance of structured and consistent approaches to victim identification. By reducing reliance on individual discretion and increasing standardized practices, the likelihood of misidentification decreases significantly. These changes also support a more proactive response rather than a reactive one, which is critical in addressing a crime that is often hidden and ongoing. These suggestions do need resources, but they are possible and will be good in the long run. Better training and coordination make investigations stronger, victims' outcomes better, and prosecutions more effective. In general, these plans make the whole criminal justice system stronger. Even though there may be cost up front to make these changes, the long-term benefits are worth those costs. Better identification leads to better case outcomes, fewer repeated victims, and a more efficient system overall. Research also suggests that investing in prevention and early identification reduces the overall burden on the criminal justice system by decreasing the number of prolonged investigations and repeated offenses. In this way, the policies are not only effective but also sustainable over time, making them a practical solution rather than just an ideal one. In conclusion, the criminal justice system still has a big problem with wrongly identifying victims of human trafficking. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act and Safe Harbor laws are examples of policies that exist but that don't work as well as they could because they aren't always followed and agents are not trained properly. To fix this problem, we need more than just changes to the rules. We need changes that affect the whole system. To fix the problem, we need to change how policies are put into action and put more emphasis on training, consistency, and working together. This is the only way the system can really protect victims and punish traffickers. Overall, the research makes it clear that without improving how these policies are implemented, the same issues will continue to occur. Addressing these problems require a shift toward more structured, informed, and coordinated practices that focuses on both victim protection and system effectiveness. Policies alone are not enough at the end of the day. If it isn't done right, victims will keep being ignored. To make the response to human trafficking more effective and fair, it is important to improve how victims are identified. In the end, making it easier to identify victims isn't just about changing the rules. It is also about making sure those rules are always followed and that work in real life. This means creating a system where policies are constantly applied, professionals are properly trained, and victims are recognized and supported from the moment that they are encountered. Thank you, and I hope you all enjoyed my Capstone research project on the challenges in identifying human trafficking victims within the United States criminal justice system. Bye.